It's spooky season time, so if you want to scare yourself or someone else, you need to check out these 13 games. Starting at 13 is Little Nightmares 2. This puzzle platformer doesn't look that bad from the cover, but it actually contains the stuff of, well, nightmares. What makes the game so scary is how odd and weird it really is. The scenes might be small, but the atmosphere is riddled with creepy sounds and spine-tingling backdrops. I don't even know how to describe it, it's just so weird. You'll encounter loads of creepy kids and people, all trying to kill you as you try to survive. Most of the time you have to evade and hide from them. Rarely do you get to use a hammer to defend yourself. If you can play this game and not be freaked out by this teacher, then you need to give yourself a pat on the back. The stretching body parts are what terrify me the most. It's so unnatural and unnerving. If you love platformers and horror, Little Nightmares 2 is a great game to get into. At 12, we have Bloober Team's newest horror game, The Medium. The Medium is a psychological horror game that takes place in two realities, the real world and the spiritual world. While this itself is not inherently scary, the creepiness comes from the old Siwa resort. The stories you uncover, they're very unsettling. And the Maw. I hated that thing's voice so much, it was unbelievably creepy. You want to know what else is creepy? That skin-wearing high-pitched voice Psycho is voiced by The Last of Us Joel, Troy Baker.
Don't leave. Always leave. Stay with me.
The more you know. The Medium has enough great story and freaky events to keep you on the edge of your seat. And if you like being stalked by the giant skin-obsessed monster and discovering your life is a lie, The Medium is a great play. At 11, I have Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. While not an outright horror game, I still think it should be on the list. It is a different type of scary. It's real. Senua is having a psychotic break during the entire game, and Ninja Theory cut no corners in creating a game that recreates that exact feeling. While making your way to hell to save your husband's soul, Senua's furies, the voices in her head, will constantly speak to you throughout the journey, often questioning your ability to fulfill your mission. Senua has delusions as well, so you never actually know what is real and what isn't. It's a brilliant game and represents these mental health disorders very effectively. It's the reason I've only been able to play half of it. And I am by no means saying people who suffer from psychotic breaks or delusions are scary, but the feeling of going through that is. As someone with Tourette's and OCD, I appreciate the work Ninja Theory did in bringing mental health to video games in a highly realistic manner. Number 10 is going to be Phasmophobia. This multiplayer ghost hunter game is great at racking up the scare moments. While you and your team try and figure out what kind of ghost you're dealing with, by the way, there's 16. You'll have to search some creepy locations like schools and asylums. You must keep your sanity up or the ghost will start to hunt that person and try and kill them. At this point, all the doors lock and you'll have to run and hide until it's over. The game does a great job with its sound effects. The dry air sound and the sound of ghosts is pretty trippy. And being able to talk to the ghost is a feature I haven't seen in many other games, and it adds a feel of realism. Phasmophobia can also create some funny moments too. Ghosts popping up out of nowhere with flashing lights, and when using your camera can create some real fun. Phasmophobia is a great co-op ghost hunting game to scare yourselves this year. Finally, in the single digits at 9, we have Outlast. Investigative journalism can be hard, but what players go through in Outlast is probably the hardest thing they'll do. Miles Upshur, an investigative journalist who goes to a psychiatric hospital only to have to fend for his life when things break into chaos. Outlast relies heavily on stealth mechanics as you cannot fight at all, and your only real source of light is using your camcorder with night vision, which makes things way more terrifying. Playing cat and mouse with the deranged variants of the psych ward, and no, they're not good Loki variants, is utterly terrifying. The game also has its fair share of jump scares, and they're very unexpected. Outlast is one of the best horror games out there, and if you're looking for scares, this is a top game to check out. The sci-fi horror Dead Space series comes up next. Visceral Games lived by their name and made a very bloody, deranged survival horror game. If you like blood and bodies being blown to pieces, this one's for you. As you try and survive as Isaac Clarke, players will encounter demonic beings called necromorphs. These reanimated, repurposed corpses will come at you from all angles and are utterly terrifying. The great lighting and gore-ridden settings within the series offer a great sci-fi horror experience. Dead Space also offers jump scares galore, and you'll never really see them coming. Dead Space is also home to one of the most iconic scenes in gaming. What else do you need to know? Play it. Number 7 is going to be none other than PT. While it is not an entire game, it is a very scary teaser to the once Silent Hills. Directed and designed by Hideo Kojima and Guillermo del Toro, that should tell you everything right there. PT created some of the scariest jump scares in gaming history. The game takes place basically in a hallway inside a house, albeit a very dark-lit, scary hallway. There are only a few rooms you can go into, one being a terrifying bathroom. The game features a ghost named Lisa who will pop out literally at any time and scare you. Mix that with horrifying radiotoxin crying babies, and PT will definitely scare you and anyone else who decides to try and play. This is one game I refuse to ever play. Number 6 is a game that was directly inspired by PT, Visage. Visage is rather interesting because there are 4 chapters, and each chapter players discover the fates of the residents who lived in the house before. These stories are disturbing, of course, and the house is super creepy. To me, Visage is like Phasmophobia with better graphics. You have items you can use at your disposal, and you have to try and not get killed by the ghost. Random doorbells ringing, children crying, flickering lights, ghosts popping up out of nowhere. Visage really has it all for a scary haunted house game. The mystery solving element adds to the game as well. Visage will test your limits and will force you into uncomfortable situations you probably don't want to deal with. Soma comes in at number 5. Soma is rather interesting because it takes place in an underwater research facility. Add some creepy scary monsters, and this quickly becomes a place of terror. Soma has been applauded for its story and setting. As you try to understand what happened at the facility, you will face many creatures trying to murder you. And if their looks don't scare you, their screeching sounds will. Add the creepy way the game screen starts to unfocus and move, and well, it gets scary real quick. Soma is a great horror game with story depth, morality choices, and scary monsters. If you're really looking for a scare and a great game in general, Soma is where you want to look. Just missing out on the top 3 is the cat and mouse game Alien Isolation, where you're the mouse and you know the cat is a xenomorph, trying to kill you at every wrong step. Alien Isolation is a brilliant game set in the world of Alien. Taking place 42 years prior to Aliens, you play as Amanda Ripley, who is trying to find her mom Ellen. The game does a fantastic job of recreating the world and its setting, thus making the xenomorph truly terrifying. The game is another stealth survival one, but it makes players question their every move. You always feel like you're being hunted because, well, you are. You do have a motion tracker at your disposal, but if you're too close to the alien, it'll hear you, and it'll instantly know where you are, basically writing your own death wish. Not only is a xenomorph an issue, but so are the other humans, the AI, and of course, facehuggers. Just hearing those footsteps behind you will send shivers down your spine as you try and run away. Alien Isolation is a true classic and should be played by anyone who is looking for a great scare. First up in the top 3 is going to be Layers of Fear, Bloober's first horror game, which is a psychological horror game set in a Victorian mansion. Players will play as a disturbed painter who's trying to complete his magnum opus, but you quickly learn that this is not going to be easy. The mansion will twist itself into some pretty scary and disturbing scenes. This is the scariest part of the game, actually. There really isn't any ghost scares, it's just how weird the mansion can get. There is also a rat problem, so if rats scare you, now's the time to get over it. At 2, we have the Silent Hill series, and more specifically, Silent Hill 2 if you only want to play 1. Silent Hill has been around for ages, but it's still the pinnacle of what horror games should be. The mysterious town of Silent Hill is never an easy one to venture into. While the graphics are obviously dated, the scares aren't. As you make your way through the foggy town, you encounter plenty of other people just as freaked out as you are. The buildings you go into are always creepy and super dark, adding to the suspense every time you venture forward in the game. The game doesn't need the jump scares of today's games either to make it scary. It's the unnerving feeling of never really knowing what is wrong. I don't want to spoil too much, but just play Silent Hill 2 if you're looking for an experience you'll never forget. Number 1 is gonna belong to Amnesia: The Dark Descent. I could have easily put Silent Hill 2 here, but I kind of feel like Amnesia is more unknown and thus granted its number 1 spot. Amnesia takes place in the 1800s in the Brennenburg Castle, and as the title suggests, your character can't remember anything that happened. As you try and figure out your past within these hollowed walls, you must keep your sanity in check or the darkness will kill you, as well as the creatures who will hunt you down until you hide from them. The game is built around a sanity meter, and if it gets too low, you'll start to have audio and visual hallucinations, making things way tougher than they need to be. The castle is creepy as any old castle would be, but the added sounds of monsters walking around in the distance is something many people can't do easily. All I can say is, don't look back when running, and if you're scared of dark water, there is a part of the game that is rather terrifying. Amnesia: Dark Descent should be a go-to game for some frightening scares. These were some of the top scary games I think you should play, and I know there are a lot of other horror games out there, and I would love to hear your opinions. Hitting that like button really helps the channel out, and subbing wouldn't hurt if you love content like this. And speaking of enjoying this content, watch this video here for more.